on types of visualizations today. And this is very important because you're talking about data. And data, when you talk about numbers, does not make a lot of sense because it could be jumbled up, it could be in a raw format, it could be a dump file, and all of that, unless it's broken down and expressed visually, would be just data without sense. It would be data that will not make a lot of meaning and will not be understandable to people, to masses in general. And since this is a course essentially for those who are interested in data visualization from a storytelling point of view, one of the core principles that I was taught when I was a student is that use easiest possible language and easiest possible format in order to convey your information. If you're able to use easiest possible format and easiest possible language to convey your information, you are a better communicator. A better communicator is someone who uses easy over tough. So I can use a lot of complex language. I can use, I can tap into my vocabulary and I can come up with brilliant, difficult terms. But if I can break it down for you, then I'm more intelligent. So the process here is to prove that I am intelligent, and hoping that this gives and adds some value to what you already know. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll go to types of visualization. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I will have to make a host for a moment.
Sure. Meanwhile, I just want to, before we dive into today's session, I think it's an important precursor to what you already know about data. What do you really understand by visualization? Anyone with a show of hand would want to, give their assessment or their understanding of what is visualization or data visualization. What do you mean by data visualization? I think you've done it. I think you've gone through 2 days of courses. So I think you know by now what data visualization is. Anyone, you please be wrong. Feel free to be wrong. Hi, Priyanka. Yes.
So I guess data visualization is where you see the data and you can get the information that the data is trying to give you. That is in simpler word, data visualization means.
Okay. So what do we understand from the word visual? Anything that you can see, right? Anything that is out there in front of your eyes that you can see. So anything that is visual, available to you in front of your eyes is a visual. Visualization is a pronoun. Sorry, Ansa, if you could please mute yourself.
You can mute. Shweta, you can mute. Whether you mute her, you are the host.
I've done that. Okay, thank you, sir. I will do that now. I didn't know. Okay. So essentially, visualization is how you present it in a visual manner that is easy to digest, easy to express, and easy to understand. So types of data visualization are various types of visuals that you will use to present your data. So I think you have so far talked about data types. You've talked about how to get data. I think you may have also briefly touched on sourcing of data. I'm not sure if you've touched on that. If you haven't, you will touch on that very soon in the next couple of days. But the moment you source your data and the moment you have that physical data and you have gotten rid of all anomalies, which is you've fact checked it, you have the final data, you know it to be true. The next step in the process is visualization, which is expression of data in a format that is easy to understand and visually appealing. So let me now share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, you can.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Types of visualization. Okay, I think I need to move it down. Okay, this is better. Okay, types of visualizations. Now, what are the types of visualizations through which you can make data presentable? So there are reasons why we visualize data. I think one of the primary reasons, as I mentioned already, is to make it appealing. right? Something that is not appealing to the eye will not register in the human brain. So to make it appealing. Second is to make it easy. Because the moment you see, as I, at the very start of the conversation was about how data in its very raw format does not make a lot of sense to people. It's not easy to decipher. It's not easy to break down. And it's not easy to understand. So second would be to make it more presentable, easy to understand, and easy to decipher. Right? So two primary reasons, as I mentioned, why you visualize data or why you put it in a visual format is one, to make it more presentable, to make it more appealing, and two, to make it easy to understand. Right? So because those are the two reasons why we do it, you will come across various graphs and charts and plottings that are more common than others. The reason that they're more common than others is because firstly, they are widely used. They've been widely put into use, and you've got a habit of going through visual graphs and charts. And can someone name me 2 or 3 things, visual form of data that they see every day? Anybody? 2, 3 visual forms of data that you see every day. No, I'm sure you see bar graphs every day, right? One bar, bigger bar, smaller bar, right? That tells you that there's a comparison that, okay, so this is a smaller bar, this is a bigger bar. The bigger bar means higher value to anything that we are quantifying. So bigger bar is a higher value. So and then we see the graph, right? I'm sure all of you must have at some point in your life seen a Sensex graph or seen a graph of how your money is doing on various stocks, right? The stock is going down, going up, going down, right? Now that's a visual representation. It's called a line chart. And then the bars are called the bar graph. So those are common visualizations that you come across every day. Nobody really taught you how to read them. Nobody told you how to decipher that data. But because it was appealing and it was so common, you got habitual of reading that data and it came naturally to you. But not all types of data visualizations are easy, and not all of them are habitual to human usage on a daily basis. We'll go through most of them today, not all of them, because if you go through different data, and this is for everyone who's attending this today, if you go through different types of visualization online, you'll find that some people list 10 types of visualizations, other will list 15 and 20 respectively. But there's no set value because there are so many of them that it'll take forever if we were to go through each and every one. I want to particularly go through those ones today, which are most used in storytelling, since the purpose of the entire course is to equip you as better storytellers. So moving on. Data visualizations. Now, when you think of data visualization, simple bar graph or pie chart come to your mind. While these may be integral part of visualizing data because they're very common, this is a common baseline for many data graphics, the right visualization must be paired with the right set of information. Please focus on those lines. The right visualization must be paired with the right set of information. And we'll understand this through data and examples, in the upcoming slides. But I'll give you an example. I have 5 pointers on how to contain air pollution, right? I have 5 pointers on how to contain air pollution because this is one of the biggest problems that Delhi is grappling with at this point in time. And if I were to use bar graph, chota bar, bada bar, usse bada bar, will I be able to justify that information? Will I be able to visualize it, make it understandable and appealing? Anyone? It's a yes or no question. Yes or no question. I have 5 points through which you can contain air pollution. I want to show to my readers. मान लो आप पत्रकार हैं, आप में से सब पत्रकार हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आप बताना चाहते हैं 5 ऐसे पॉइंट्स अखबार में और आपको राइट विजुअलाइजेशन बताना है अपने ग्राफिक्स टीम को. आपको बताना पड़ेगा that this is how you see this being visualized. Will a bar graph do? एक बार, बड़ा बार, छोटा बार?
No, it wouldn't suffice.
It won't suffice, right? It won't suffice. It will not do justice with what you have, right? So we'll know what will do justice because we're going to go through types of data visualization. But yes, bar graph is not going to help. Will a line chart help? A line chart? I don't think so. Line chart is not going to help either. So what will help? That needs to be decided, because as I said, your data must be paired with the right information, and your right information must be used by the graphics team to give you a table, a graph, a visualization that you can understand, that your readers can understand. So shifting focus, there's a whole selection of visualization methods to present data in effective and interesting way. And we're going to go through now general types of visualizations. Number one is chart. Chart, anything is a chart. Two-axis, bar graph, tabular form, everything is a chart. I'm going to show it through data, through visual. So don't worry. Don't be like, oh, I don't see anything on my screen, so how do I know? I'll show it to you. So two-axis, graph, diagram, map, everything is a chart. So it's like a common term that you use for variety of data visualization. But then there are more concentrated specific data visualizations like a table, a set of figures that are displayed in rows and columns. Table to pata hoga sabko. Table, right? That has rows, that has columns. That's a table. Moving on, there is a graph. A graph essentially is a diagram of points, lines, segments, curves, areas that represent certain variables and comparisons to each other, usually along two axes, right? So a graph will usually have x-axis and y-axis. हम maths में पढ़ते थे x-axis, y-axis, and then you're trying to compare using a graph. An infographic example is on your screen. A combination of visuals and words that represent data usually uses charts and diagrams. Can you see the data, the sample text, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? That is an infographic. Most commonly used type of visualization in storytelling is an infographic. Most commonly used. Why? Because infographics will help you tell numeric data, and it will also help you tell data through words, lines, texts. So if I were to go back to my first example of me having 5 points to talk about how to contain air pollution, I'm going to go for an infographic. I'm not going to go for a chart. I'm not going to go for a bar graph. I'm going to go for infographic, because through an infographic, I will be able to do justice with that type of data. Can someone give me like an example of how else can you use an infographic? Just any example from your daily life. Anybody? I just want to make it more interactive, guys, because I think it's important that we talk. We've got good. Yes, please. Yes.
I think the example that you shared earlier, like there are 5 points to reduce air pollution. I guess we can use infographic to show those 5 points as well.
Yes, absolutely. Any other example that you have that you can show through an infographic of your daily life? Any daily life example? या आपने कभी न्यूज़पेपर में पढ़ा हो पिछले 1-2 दिन में, infographic देखा हो कहीं पे?
Last week there was a news of courses that students are regretting doing. Like journalism was one of the courses listed in that. That can be done through this. That can be shown.
That's an interesting one. I'm not sure that this is the right data visualization for that, but this can definitely be used to show 5 things that people have to talk about doing journalism, right? Like 5 reasons why journalism is the worst possible course to choose, right? Like low paid, more longer working hours, difficult environment. So you can use these as 5 texts on why people are not liking a degree in journalism anymore, which pains me a lot because I have 2 degrees in journalism. I'm not sure if it's very helpful, but yeah, that's a good example. Thank you. Whoever, I am not able to see your face, so I don't know who said that, but thank you very much. It's a good addition. Should we move on further? I just have to drop a text, sorry. And I will be with you in a minute. Okay, that's done. Sorry, that's my boss who's wanting to know why I'm missing a meeting. So, shifting focus now, other types of data visualization. Geospatial is very, very important and very, very interesting, because if you are to visualize data that shows things in a map using different shapes and colors to show relationship between pieces of data in specific location, then you use a geospatial. Can you see the geospatial map on screen? Geospatials are commonly used when you want to understand the geography of a location, right? So you want to understand the climatic condition, you want to understand flora and fauna, you want to further break it down on how, for example, what's in the core of the earth. If you want to show to a child the core of the earth, then you will use a geospatial. If you want to tell people about how fast the soil is degrading, right? So if you are in TV and if you're a working journalist and you want to show people how fast the degradation of the upper layer of earth or the soil is happening, at what pace, then you use a geospatial. Geospatial is usually used in digital, not in print. It's used in TV a lot because there are very heavy graphics now in TV. There was a point where you could not use a geospatial on TV, but now with advancement, with technology, there's just so much happening. अब तो बिल्कुल UFOs दिखा देते हैं न्यूज़ रूम में, तो geospatial तो easy है ही. So this is a very common, as I've said, data chart or data representation or visualization, whatever word you like to call it, called geospatial, that you use to show data in map form using different shapes and colors to show relationship between pieces of data and specific locations. Yeah. Shifting focus now to dashboards. Now, this is very interesting. All of you must have come across a dashboard at some point of time, right? So it's your content management systems that use dashboards. It's your companies that use dashboards. So dashboards is a collection of visualization. So on your screen, you'll see a variety of things, right? You'll see a data chart. You can see there is a pie chart. There is a map plotting, there is a bar graph, there's a vertical bar, and there is a horizontal bar. So there are a variety of visualization. A dashboard is a collection of visualizations and data displayed in one place to help with analysis and presentation of data. So what happens here is when you want to show a lot of data visualizations on one screen, and let's say, to give you an example, I am doing a 10-year assessment of how Delhi's climatic conditions have fared. I'm doing a 10-year assessment of how Delhi's climatic conditions have fared. And I will use 3-4 pointers. So I will use pollution as a pointer. I will use climatic temperature changes as a pointer. I will use, vehicular pollution and sale of vehicles as an example, because remember, vehicular pollution leads to overall pollution. And similarly, I will use other, examples. I want to show a collection of data here. What do I want to show? I want to show temperature कैसे बदल रहा है, कम ज़्यादा हो रहा है. मुझे ये भी दिखाना है कि किस तरीके से क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस बदल रही ईयर ऑन ईयर. सो देन आई कैन शो अ बार ग्राफ. इस साल ऐसा था, इस साल ऐसा था, इस साल ऐसा था. तो हाउ इट्स गेटिंग वर्स, राइट? या तो डाउनवर्ड कर्व होगा या अपवर्ड कर्व होगा, डिपेंडिंग ऑन कौन सा कर्व देखना चाह रहे हैं. पोल्यूशन अपवर्ड कर्व में बढ़ रहा है, क्लाइमेट डाउनवर्ड कर्व में जा रहा है. तो मुझे खूब सारा डेटा दिखाना है क्योंकि मैं असेसमेंट कर रही हूँ 10 साल की प्रोग्रेस का. तो मैं जो यूज करूंगी प्रॉपर ओवरऑल जो मेरा निकल के बाहर आएगा चार्ट, उसको डैशबोर्ड कहा जाएगा. A data visualization dashboard is an interactive dashboard that allows you to track key metric data across multiple marketing channels, visualize data points, and create report. If you're doing a report for a company, if you're doing a report for your audience, for people who watch you, people who read you, then dashboards are better ways of telling data. And dashboards will allow you and your audience to interact with one another. इस साल कितना था, अगले साल कितना हुआ, एक फिगर ये है, एक फिगर ये है, then next figure is a different subject matter altogether. It's a matter of climate. Then the next figure is a matter of pollution. Then the next figure is a matter of vehicular pollution. And then there could be something about urban development, कि कितने घर बन रहे हैं, कितनी तेजी से progress हो रहा है दिल्ली में. So all of that data combined would be your dashboard. Dashboards are important because they're interactive, as I said. They're also important because you get a variety of data on screen, and people are able to pick whichever data they want and then create a report if they have to create a report, or maybe just understand data on the basis of all the hard work that you've put in. Does it make sense so far? Any questions? Questions? No questions? Okay, we'll move forward. All right, area map. Now, if I were to talk about various places in Delhi where the pollution is worse, आप में से कई लोग, how many of you track pollution by the way? And you must be like, why is she talking about pollution all the time? Because this is the time we talk about pollution in Delhi. But how many of you actually look at your AQI, the air quality index? आप में से कितने लोग AQI देखते हैं? No one? I can see 2 participants raising their hands. AQI is the air quality index. And it's very interesting because if you were to look at your AQI, it will tell you how in some places air quality is worse than other places. And it uses an area map, right? So what's an area map? A form of geospatial visualization. Area maps are used to show specific value sets over a map of a country, state, county, and any other geographical location. 2 common types are choropleths and isopleths. Now, choropleths is the map that you see on your screen. A choropleth is this map, right? Isopleth will not have colors. So choropleth क्या होता है? जहां आप एक color का variation use करते हो. I'll repeat that, but if you can pay attention right now, एक color का variation use करते हो ये दिखाने के लिए कि वो value या तो कैसे better हो रही है या degrade हो रही है, right? मान लीजिए usually orange और red heat map के लिए दिखाया जाता है. तो एक choropleth में क्या होगा, एक orange या red को orange and then suddenly red and redder and the ultimate red, to basically show, oh, this place is the hottest place, right? If you were to show the same thing about I don't know, let's take an example of what how green an area is, right? हम अक्सर देखते हैं ना भारत में सबसे greener जगह कौन, सबसे greener state कौन सी है, तो हम दिखाते हैं और हल्का green, lighter फिर darker and the darkest green area. So darkest green area has the most forest cover, right? That is an example of area map. Area map are basically, I'll repeat what I said, are geospatial visualizations and used to show specific value sets over a map of a country, a state, a county, or a geographical location. They are of 2 types. This is a choropleth and an isopleth. Choropleth will usually have numbers and values that are spread over a chain of colors. Color chain that is either increasing or decreasing depending on what you're looking at, and it will tell you with each color that you can compare to the previous color, and then you realize, okay, this is the best value and this is the worst value, right? So that's a choropleth. Isopleth usually does not have any color, it only has values written. तो इस मैप में जो आप अपनी स्क्रीन पे देख पा रहे हैं, इसमें अगर कलर हटा दे और केवल वैल्यू लिख दे, राइट? मान लीजिए हीट मैप है, यहाँ पे हम टेम्परेचर लिख दें एक जगह का, तो वो आइसोप्लेथ बन जाएगा, पर है ये एरिया मैप ही. और अगर इसी डेटा को मुझे रॉ फॉर्म में दिखाना होता, रॉ डेटा होता, तो ये क्या होता है पता है? ये आपको, वैसे तो ये स्टेट्स का मैप है, पर ये अगर आपको दिखाना होता इंडिया के लिए, तो आप देखते हर स्टेट का नाम, उनका फॉरेस्ट कवर, अगर ये फॉरेस्ट कवर पे डेटा होता, कितना फॉरेस्ट कवर घटा बढ़ा, क्या हुआ कितने टाइम में, तो आपके पास रॉ डेटा होता. कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं लेता रॉ डेटा में, किसी को समझ में नहीं आता वो रॉ डेटा. मैं खोल के भी नहीं देखती. I know I wouldn't have watched it, so I'm sure nobody else would watch it too, right? But the moment you see a green India, and then you see a darker green India, and then you see a lighter green India, it automatically registers in your mind that, oh, these parts of the country are greener than the rest of the country. And then you see a heat map of India, it automatically registers in your mind, oh, so there is the North India at this point is raging under very hot climatic conditions. So the temperature in north is very high, because look at that big red on north of India, Lucknow, Bihar, Jharkhand, कितना वहां पे उस वक्त रेड है, नीचे देखोगे तो बेटर क्लाइमेट है. तो जब आप क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस को, जब आप फॉरेस्ट कवर को, जब आप पोल्यूशन को थ्रू एरिया मैप्स देखते हो, तो वो जल्दी से आप उसे रजिस्टर कर पाते हो और जल्दी से वो एक्सप्लेन हो जाता है आपके व्यूअर्स को. मूविंग ऑन टू बार चार्ट्स. बार चार्ट समझते हैं आप में से कोई? Who understands bar chart? Anyone? You know what are bars? These are bars. Can you see this? Can you see my cursor? Okay. So you see bigger, longer bar, smaller bar, smaller bar, smaller bar, suddenly a little longer. This is a bar. Yeah. So this is a bar chart. So representation of a bar chart, as you just saw yourself on the screen, bigger bar means more value, smaller bar means lesser value, right? So let's say if this were to be a bar chart of population of India, bigger bar here on MP means more people in MP. Smaller bar here on Delhi means population of Delhi is less than that of population of MP. So it's just a comparison of data using bars. है ना? तो ये आप जैसे अपनी स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं बार्स. तो बार चार्ट क्या होता है? बार चार्ट represent numerical values compared to each other. The length of the bar represents the value of each variable. If the longer the length of the bar, the more the value of the variable. So population के केस में आप यूज कर सकते हैं, various other data that you can use it for, right? Crime rate के केस में यूज कर सकते हैं, right? The number of crimes that were reported. हर साल आप में से शायद कई लोग जानते भी होंगे, हर साल NCRB क्राइम डेटा रिलीज करता है थ्रू आउट द कंट्री, राइट? नेशनल क्राइम रिकॉर्ड्स ब्यूरो. उस केस में बार चार्ट्स बहुत काम आते हैं, बिकॉज उस केस में आप कंपेयर कर सकते हैं कि पर 1000 या पर 100 पॉपुलेशन के हिसाब से किस स्टेट में कितने क्रिमिनल्स हैं या कितने क्राइम हो रहे हैं. और कितने क्राइम हो रहे हैं, हर टाइप का क्राइम, थेफ्ट से लेकर रेप से लेकर रोड एक्सीडेंट से लेकर हर टाइप का डेटा बाहर आता है. बार चार्ट वुड बी वेरी हेल्पफुल टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हिच स्टेट इज सेफर देन द अदर. Yeah, you can't use an area map there. Because can someone answer why we can't use an area map to show crime? Anybody? Why we can't show an area map? Why data visualization? This is an important aspect of data visualization. Why can't you show like a map like this to show crime rates in the country? Anybody? Wild guess. I need a wild guess, because this is common sense. This is not you being better than your senior colleagues or junior colleagues. This is just common sense. Why can't you use an area map? Why should you use a bar chart? No one? Think, just basic. मैंने अभी आपको बताया कि आप कई चीजों में, जैसे कि पॉपुलेशन है, ग्रीनरी है, आपका फॉरेस्ट कवर है, आपके क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस हैं, उसमें आप एरिया मैप यूज कर सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर आप क्राइम रेट कंपेयर कर रहे हैं तो आपको बार चार्ट यूज करना चाहिए. कोई बता सकता है एरिया मैप क्यों नहीं यूज करना चाहिए? नहीं? ओके, विल नॉट वेस्ट एनी मोर टाइम. एरिया मैप से आप फेयर कंपैरिजन नहीं कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हर स्टेट की पॉपुलेशन अलग अलग है, राइट? So हर स्टेट की पॉपुलेशन अलग अलग है, and so you will see that crimes, if need to be compared on a fixed variable, which is per 100, per 1000, per million. It cannot be compared, oh, you know what, the crime in Delhi is equivalent to crime in MP. No, Delhi is a very small place. If the crime in Delhi is equivalent to crime in MP, then Delhi has more criminals. Understood? Does that make sense? Please tell me if you want me to repeat that. You cannot compare a smaller state with a bigger state. So you cannot use an area map to compare criminals. Why? Because smaller states, if have equal criminals as compared to bigger states, that means in smaller states, the crime rate is way more, right? It can be the other way around also. It can be that in a bigger state, crime rate, you would be like, okay, the crime rate is low in Bihar. The crime rate in Bihar and Jharkhand is equivalent, or crime rate in Bihar and Himachal is equivalent. So the number of people dying of road accident in Bihar is equivalent to number of people dying in Himachal Pradesh is a bad comparison. Why? Because the terrain is different, geography is different, right? Also, the population sizes of both these states, where one is a very big state, one is a very small state. If it's low in Bihar and it's low in Himachal, it may be actually high in Himachal, right? It may be very high in Himachal. That is because of the terrain, right? In Bihar, because the population is way more, you cannot draw comparisons. So you can never use an area map if you are to be quantifying and using data visualization to talk about crime rates. This is just one example. You'll see a lot of such examples. Just understand why. Maybe just put in your own understanding, sense of understanding the moment you presented data. What is the best visualization that you can use for that particular data? Moving on. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to... okay, heat map. Interesting. A type of geospatial visualization in map form which displays specific data value as different colors. This doesn't need to be temperatures, but that is just a common use. Can you see here a heat map? A heat map is a type of an area map, right? The only difference here is you're using more than one color. In an area map, you'll use variation of that one color. तो यहाँ पे orange, 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 red, 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 reddish, and then बहुत the ultimate red. अगर आप उसी स्पेक्ट्रम को यूज करते तो ये एरिया मैप कहलाता, पर ये यहाँ पर हीट मैप है, और हीट मैप अपने आप में इतना स्पेसिफिक टाइप का एरिया मैप बन चुका है क्योंकि बहुत कॉमनली यूज होता है, राइट? पिछले 10 सालों में हीट मैप का सबसे ज्यादा यूज होता आ रहा है. I think it's self-explanatory. You can see the hottest parts and you can see the least hot parts, and you can understand which parts of this country get most sunlight. A pie chart. I didn't put an example. I think I did put an example. Let's move further in the PPT and we'll know. A pie chart is a circular chart with triangular segments that show data as percentage of a whole. A pie, what's a pie? Let me see if I have an example of a pie here with me. Anybody, what's a pie? Math wala pie? Yeah, pie wala pie. I don't see anything. Oh, I do see something. This is a pie. You see a pie? Yeah, a pie is a pie. Pie is nothing but a circle. Parts of it will tell you data that can be adequately represented. For example, 100 people living in my home, 40, or maybe 40 is too much, 30 are women, then 30% of this pie becomes women. 70% remaining is men. So anything that is represented in a circular chart with triangular segments and shows data as a whole is called a pie chart. This is an example of a pie chart. Okay, line graphs. Now, this is most important because line graphs are very, very widely used. So, line graphs, also called line charts, are simple but effective staple for representing time series data. What's a time series data? Data that changes over time. जो डेटा समय के साथ बदलता है उसे टाइम सीरीज डेटा कहते हैं. दे आर विजुअली सिमिलर टू स्कैटर प्लॉट्स. स्कैटर प्लॉट्स कुछ नहीं होते. आप लाइन देख रहे हो ना, यहाँ पर स्कैटर प्लॉट्स में डॉट 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 होते हैं, राइट? स्कैटर प्लॉट्स हैव डॉट डॉट डॉट्स. हियर यू हैव लाइंस, but represent data points separated by time intervals with segments joined by a line. So time interval आप देख सकते हैं. Evolution of Bitcoin prices. This is one of the most widely used line graph. So between 2014 to 15, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, and suddenly 17 में क्या होता है? Spike होता है. The price of Bitcoin goes very, very up, right? stable चल रहा है, suddenly you see a spike in the year 2017 to 18, and उसके बाद तो आपको पता है इस वक्त 2022 में बिटकॉइन का क्या हाल है. तो जिसने इन्वेस्ट कर दिया वो खुशनसीब है, जिन्होंने नहीं किया अब मत कीजिएगा. Basically, line graphs, as I said, they represent data points separated by time intervals with segments that are joined by a line. This allows for quick observation of features like acceleration or no, not an acceleration. So basically, data points that tell you that something is going up or something is coming down. So acceleration and deacceleration and volatility. Volatility क्या होती है? When the line, आप अक्सर सुनते होंगे, this is very interesting. आप लोग अक्सर सुनते होंगे ना, market बहुत volatile है. How many of you understand what does that mean? Market बहुत volatile चल रहा है आजकल. Anybody? Very commonly used term.
Unpredictable.
Not unpredictable, ma'am. But yeah, I mean, people use it generally to say it's unpredictable, but it may not be unpredictable all the time. So, for example, what example can I give you? I don't have a lot of things around me right now, but let's say the stock of Britannia, the company that makes biscuits, among other things, is going up and down a lot. And there could be a reason. People may already know the reason. मान लीजिए आपके जो wheat flour लगता है बिस्किट बनाने में, उसका प्राइस सडनली बढ़ गया, राइट? उसका प्राइस बढ़ गया तो क्या होगा? स्टॉक गिर जाता है. क्यों? एनीवन? व्हीट फ्लावर का प्राइस बढ़ा, ब्रिटानिया का स्टॉक क्यों गिरा? क्योंकि दैट्स वन ऑफ द रॉ इंग्रेडिएंट्स दैट यू यूज टू मेक बिस्किट्स, है ना? बिस्किट्स बनाने के लिए व्हीट फ्लावर का यूज होता है, तो क्योंकि व्हीट फ्लावर का प्राइस बढ़ा, स्टॉक घटा. फिर सडनली गवर्नमेंट ने कंसेशन दे दिया, फिर स्टॉक ऊपर चला गया. तो वॉलेटिलिटी का मतलब होता है जब लाइन अपवर्ड्स एंड डाउनवर्ड्स इरेटिकली मूव कर रहे, इरेटिकली, right? That's called market being volatile. You were right, ma'am, partly. I think it was Abhilasha speaking, because it is unpredictable at times. Sometimes it's predictable, sometimes it's unpredictable, but it's usually erratic. It's sudden, right? Because of the suddenness, you say it's volatile. So agar next time aapko koi bolega ki haan, oh, market is very volatile, they're not more financially literate, they just know their data visualization, right? They know that it basically is that the line is moving up and down a lot. So that's why it's volatility. That is the measure of the word volatility. Everything clear so far? I know I'm speaking a lot. Clear? Yeah? Okay. Let's move on then, because I want to keep the next okay, so we are already on the last slide, because I want to keep the last 10 minutes for questions. These are some graphs in front of you. Can someone tell me which type of data visualization is what? Let's start with number one. Here. What visualization is this? Anybody? I mean, you should really, yes.
Table.
Okay, table.
Bar.
Anybody? Table?
Next
Anybody
bar.
else? Okay, the next one's bar. Third one?
Graph.
Graph. And
I think you should watch, you should see the answers in this message box. Participants are writing.
writing.
We should read it also.
Subha just trying to speak.
You know, you guys should speak. I would love to hear your voices, but I
And the
can't.
last one is pi.
The last one is pi. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody who disagrees, thinks it's not? I don't know how to move.
Is third one a line graph?
Is third one a line graph? I will only answer that question once I have everybody's answers. But what do you think it is?
I don't remember the term that you used for the another graph when you were describing a line graph.
Okay.
I think it is that one.
Okay. Your guess is it's a line graph. Okay. Fair enough. I don't know how to see.
No, I think otherwise. I don't think it's a line graph.
You don't think it's a line graph. Okay.
No.
Understood. I can't read messages, unfortunately. Can please, if you have any answers that you're giving, can you please read them aloud for me? Answers, if you're writing, please read them aloud for me. I mean, I would love for more participation.
Pragya, you do it. Pragya.
Yes, sir. One is table, second is bar from Ganesh Shankar. He's saying Priyanka says table 1 and Ganesh says 4 to pi and 3 to line. So far, these
Okay.
are the answers.
Okay. So I think I'm good. First one is a table for sure. Why? What is the attribute of a table? We just read it.
It has rows and columns.
Exactly. It has rows and columns. Anything with a row and column is a table. The second one, I think a lot of you are saying bar. Why do you think it's a bar?
It has bars in it.
It has bars in it. And so bars are telling you which variable is more in which of these bars, right? So if the variables in A are more than variables in B, are more than variables in C, more than variables in D. What's the third one?
Line graph.
Most probably a line graph, right? Why is it a line graph? Why is it a line graph? What is the quality of a line graph? A line chart or a line graph? We actually just spoke about it. Let's go back. What is the quality of a line graph?
Yeah, it shows change with time.
Exactly.
Trends can be studied through line graphs.
Yeah, it actually shows upward or a downward acceleration or deacceleration of data, right? Plotted through, joined through a line. So as you can see, data upward, downward, joined through a line. So if I were to understand the most basic nature of a line graph, there will be a line joining dots. There will be an acceleration and deacceleration of data. Simple, right? Data going up and down. That's a line chart. The last one is actually called a donut. It's not called a pie because pi is a full circle. If you remove the interior of it, it's called a donut. People confuse, and actually you can use both these words. They're interchangeable, if you ask me. But usually, one that does not have a center is called a donut. It's shaped like a donut. जो donut हम लोग खाते हैं बाहर, right? So that's the difference between pi. Pi is the full circle. Donut is the outer ring of the circle. So far, so good. Are we clear?
Is there any difference between the presentation of the data in it, pi
No.
and donut?
No, ma'am.
Just word is there, like differentiation of words, right?
Differentiation of words, and also in important to remember, in donut you will see a part of the area that the representation is same. I mean, you can see the gray part that will tell you that that portion of data is different from the remainder portion of the data. In a pie, you'll see a triangle because there's a center, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see a
But
triangle.
the representation of data will be the same because you are taking, for example, you have taken the example of men and women in a family. So that will be same.
Yes, ma'am, that will be same. It can use for same sets of data, if that's the question you're asking. The same set of data, yes.
Otherwise, they have given the different names.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got the last 10 minutes. I want to first 5 minutes. I want to give you a quick job to do. Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, this is good. Lovely. So I want to give you a quick job to do. And then I would want to have 5 minutes for question answers. Let's do the question answers first. And then the last 5 minutes, you will have a small assignment that you can share with me. Let's do the question answers in the first 5 minutes. So let's start. Anybody has any questions? Any questions?
Participants must ask questions अगर क्वेरीज हैं या कुछ एड ऑन भी करना चाहते हैं, दे कैन एड ऑन. Without video, it is not clear who is listening or not. But I think this was self-explanatory,
Okay.
but still.
Okay, then I do have an assignment to give. So this is the assignment, and maybe you can draw it out. Maybe you can make it, you can actually make it on your computer if you feel like, if you know how to use data visualization and charts on computer. If you want to just draw it out, draw it out. But I want you to give me data visualization for following questions. Number one. Should I go ahead? Okay, so number one, let me read this out, in fact. Okay, now I'm not able to locate the file, but I know what I've written. So I've actually given you this example before, but I'm going to say this again. So number one is that there is a gender problem in the country. Male-female ratio remains a difficult subject. In certain states, obviously, the female ratio is equivalent to male ratio, but in other states, most states, female ratio is relatively lower. You are to present this data on a chart. Use the most appropriate chart to compare states on how they are faring as far as male-female ratio is concerned. That is number one. Number two, monsoons have been delayed. Now, these are why I'm saying these are case studies, because this usually happens a lot. These are case studies. Monsoons have been delayed, and there is unequitable rainfall in various parts of this country. Through an appropriate data visualization, show us which state is getting more rain as compared to other. Make sense? So you have the gender problem, then you have the rainfall problem. Yeah. Third, and this is where I'm going to end it, I don't want to inundate you with a lot of things to do. Corruption remains a major cause of concern across the world. And I'm not talking about India, I'm talking about world now. Some countries are more corrupt than others. There is a recent report that has come out that talks about the most corrupt countries and the least corrupt countries in the world. Through appropriate data visualization, present this data for your audience on which country is doing how when it comes to corruption. You want me to repeat any of these?
So in the third one, or for example, in any case study, we can take numbers on our own.
Yes, you can. You can use data. If you feel like, you can make the data on your own. It's just, it's not a concern with data and which state or country you're calling more corrupt or which state is getting more rainfall. I want to see how you visualize data, right? So what I'm trying to test is your data visualization and understanding from today's session. That's all. Not which state you decide to give most rainfall to. You can choose actual data from internet, right? Or you can just do it on your own. But I want to see the data visualization. Gender problem, rainfall problem, corruption problem. Yeah, 3 sets of data visualization. If you can all do it, either you can actually do it on your computer. You can do it whichever application you're using. You can use Excel to do it because it's easy to make charts on Excel. You can actually do it on a piece of paper. It does not matter because nobody needs to know these applications today. You have graphics people who are doing it for you, but it's always good if you know how to do it, right? It's always good if you know how to use these applications. If you can't, there'll be a graphics team for you which will be doing it for you. And I don't know if it's a part of the course, maybe Sir can tell us, but this should be a taught skill. Everybody should know how to do basic pie chart, bar graph, सबको आने चाहिए. हम स्कूल में सिखाए जाते थे, पर सबको आने चाहिए. बहुत आसान होते हैं बनाने और आपके काम आएंगे आगे भी. तो ये 3 चीजों पे मुझे आप लोगों का डेटा विजुअलाइजेशन चाहिए. जो भी टाइप आप यूज करना चाहें यूज कर सकते हैं. इसके अलावा जो मैंने आज कहा। उसके अलावा अगर आपको कोई और डेटा विजुअलाइजेशन पसंद आता है जो आप यूज करना चाहेंगे तो वो भी यूज कर सकते हैं. And I think that's that from my side, sir.
Okay, Shweta, thank you very much. I loved your pie wala example. Could you just show the pie once again? That was very interesting.
You know, this just came
Bottle
off from
cap.
one of my
Bottle cap or magnet? What's that?
no, actually, ma'am, this just came off from one of my curtains. Just fell this morning,
I
and
was
this
just noticing what is that round thing you're showing it. It was so sweet of you. And this
like,
entire
कुछ रखा था सुबह देखा था मैंने तो वो this is this round.
okay,
Yeah,
I was seeing. I thought it was a bottle cap or a magnet that you put on the almirahs.
Yeah,
No,
just
that was a very funny and very interesting example which you had. And actually, I was just listening to what you were explaining. It was very interesting, and I hope types of visualization, data visualization, it is very easily understandable because you have given very recent and very accurate examples. So I don't think anyone else would have any other questions also. And I hope your assignment is also clear what ma'am gave you, all of you. And if you have any questions, you can always ask her later also. So thank you, Shweta, for a lovely.
I'm just going to leave my credentials here. I'm also going to leave, yeah, this is my email ID, and you can actually, if you have any questions after this, you can approach me. I always use my social media. I'm active on social media. You can approach me on this. I'm just leaving my handle here. And if you anything that I can help you with, it will be a pleasure. Yeah. So feel free to write back. We would love to keep connected. I think all the resource persons and all of us here would love to stay in touch even after this course is done for long-term collaboration, and be involved in whatever you guys are doing tomorrow and be able to help you if we can, and you can help us if we need any help from you. Thank you very much for being a patient audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so to all the participants, sir, do we give them a break for 5 minutes or we start off with the second section?
Just a minute. Give a break for 5 minutes.
Okay, then we'll be back by.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, I welcome you all on the behalf of News Writer Sen. And today we have with us Ranjit Sengut. He is the today's speaker for the second session, that is understanding the visual vocabulary for the visual data visualization. So over to you, sir. And I think already you have taken the session. Yesterday I attended your session and participants are known to you. So over to you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Before we get started, I would want either Priyanka Yadav or Reji to summarize what you have learned in the first session and the previous session. If you can just briefly tell me what are the things that what were the key findings from the previous session? Priyanka, can you go?
Do I have to share the previous, like
No,
the
you don't
one
have to
that...
share. I'm just trying to understand what are the things that you learned from it, the key findings or things that have stayed on with you from the last session itself.
Like the last session that you took, right?
Just summarize it for me.
Okay, sorry, I won't be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Anybody else?
Why you are so attentive and you are saying I won't be able to do it?
But yesterday I was not
Interacting,
that...
right?
I
Trainer,
attended
right?
in mid session that I could understand that data can lie. That was very interesting line which you spoke, I think yesterday, data can lie. So this is what I can recall.
I'm talking about the session
No,
that we
we wanted to know about today's session, what we just.
Today's session.
Priyanka, were you there today? Or anybody else for that matter?
Yeah, okay, if you're talking about like today's
Okay,
session.
about madam.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one just got over. The one that
So
just
yeah,
got
it was about types of data visualization, like what kind of charts or graphs or different visualization tools that we can use to show different types of data. So for example, if we have to compare things, a bar graph would do much better than an area map. Or for example, if we have to show a ratio, then a pie chart would do much better than any other tool. So there were multiple examples, and we also had some case studies as well that we have got as a post-work of that. So yeah, that was all in all, like there were different kind of tools, and which tool is more appropriate to show which kind of data visualization.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
a lot.
you.
Thanks a lot. It was nicely done, Priyanka. So I'll just take it forward from the previous session. I'll just, I need, sir, access to share my screen.
Sir, you need to make him host. Yes.
Yeah, I'm now the
Right.
host. Thanks a lot. Yep. Is my screen visible to all?
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So today, taking forward from what the last session was, we are basically building up on that. And you would see a lot of things that I would be repeating, which has been already said in the previous, because it is very important. And what we've realized over time as practicing journalists is, if you keep on repeating the same thing, if it is important enough, you have to keep on repeating the same thing so that it has a longer shelf life and a longer recall value. So today, what I'll be talking about, there are 4 things that I'll be talking about. First is, how do we look at things? So it's basically how individuals usually look at things. It is something that is driven from a little bit of psychology, a little bit of how our brain works, and a little bit of how marketing and an advertising world operates. Then we'll try to develop an understanding of how visualizations are constructed on top of it. We will also briefly talk about the different types of popular infographics that exist in the market. That will give you a fair bit of idea of what are the basic. So what we looked at the previous session was the basic tools like graphs and bars and pie and chart. So what I'll try to do is bring them all together to make somewhat of a dashboard kind of a setup. And finally, I'll leave you guys with a small tool that I use in my workplace, which is called the art of sketching. It is completely homemade and in-house. So what I normally do is when I'm thinking of a visualization, how to go about, when I've analyzed my raw data, then I use a tool called sketching, which is basically I use a paper and pen, and I basically try to sketch out how or what to do. So I'm basically making 3-4 different iterations to understand which one would have a better impact in terms of communicating the message that I want to give forward. So that is basically what we'll be looking at today. So first and foremost, a bit of how our brain works. So if you look at it, this visualization, so we see all our visualizations through our eyes, and then from there it goes to our brain. So there are 3 kinds of memories that are there in human brain. So one is called the iconic memory, which is nothing but something that is alarming. You just stop. So if you're seeing all red and all of a sudden you see pink or blue or black, you stop and take notice of it. So this is basically the level at which all our visualizations work. So if you look at, think of all the visualizations that we've looked at, we basically work on that, something that stands out. So the good thing about the iconic memory is that it basically stops and takes notice of something that is abnormal in the setup. Then after that, what happens is the information is transported to something called a short-term memory. So short-term memory is basically where you skim through the infograph for the information that is over there. If you are able to keep your consumer or the customer or your end user or a reader till that period of time, and if that person is truly interested in the message or the story or the idea that you're selling, then it goes into the long-term memory where you actually sit down and you go through it at leisure. So the evolution that has happened with the proliferation of new media and internet is that earlier, if you remember, when we were growing up, or I think in fact when I was growing up, most of you would have been really young at the point in time, we had the habit of reading the morning newspaper. So what would happen is, no matter how good or bad the newspaper was, we would at least spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour going through it. Nowadays, with the advent of mobile phones and internet and screen time, we are multitasking. So I'm working at my workplace and parallelly also going through the session, and parallelly also if there is a notification on my phone, I look at it. So basically it is getting scattered. So in that kind of a setup, the focus has to be to catch the iconic memory of your readers. And that is basically why visualizations are extremely important in today's age and time, and even more important than what it was, let's say, 15 or 20 years back. So moving on from that, how our brain works is like the short-term memory is like a computer parlance would be the RAM, basically, where it's a very high-speed memory kind of a place where you basically skim through and you realize whether you like it or not, and then it moves to the long-term memory. So research show that short-term memory for an average individual can take 3 to 7 chunks of data at a time. So what that means is that the most important piece of information or your visual should not have, so if you have a pie, it should not have a pie with 28 or 32 different pieces within that. If that happens, in most likelihood, your reader would be too intimidated to go forward. So what you can do then is, let's say what we normally do at our workplaces. So if I am trying to show the population of different countries in the world, so we've got, I think, around 200 plus countries in the world. And if I want to show that in a pie kind of a visualization, it is not the most ideal way of going about, but still for drama, if I want to show that. So what I'll do is I will show India, China, and let's say, I'm assuming US is the third most populous country in the world. So I show those three, and the other places would become others in that. So it'll be a chunk. So at the end of the day, I have got 4 different chunks instead of having 222 or 230 different chunks. So here's an example of this. So this is a perfectly good bar graph in terms of the semantics, in terms of how it has been designed. But if you look at it, there are way too many information, way too many products that have been plotted over here. So this would eventually lead to your readers becoming intimidated. So this is a bad visualization. So we would try to keep it as small as possible. And one of the basic concepts that go along with so how the human brain perceives things, there's something called pre-attentive attributes. Pre-attentive attributes are these basic visual blocks on the basis of which we can look at things differently. And pre-attentive attributes is the basic building block for different kinds of bars, charts, and all the other visualizations that we talked about. So a classic example of this is if you see what just came up on the left, there are, if I were to ask you, can you spot the number of 5s that are over here? There are a lot of numbers over here starting from 9, 8, 7, 3, 4, and there are a lot of 5s sprinkled all over. It's very difficult to spot over here. But a good pre-attentive attribute, the same box over here, if you look at it, 5 stands out over here. So over here, the pre-attentive attribute is the use of color. So this is basically a way, if I wanted to show you the number of 5s, number of times 5 has been shown in this data, in this data box, then this is a way of going about. So this is an example of pre-attentive attribute. There are several other pre-attentive attributes that we use. So if you think about it, over here, we've used color, there is gray and black. Similarly, all the visualizations that we look at, we have a use of color. What in the previous session, we were talking about how in the chloropleth map, we use different shades of color, green or red or blue, if you're talking about air pollution. So different shades of colors are very easy to understand. So it's a very good pre-attentive attribute. So these are the sum total of all pre-attentive attributes that exist in the world. And I'll just quickly run through each one of them. And they are good for different kinds of visualizations. The first is called the orientation over here. Orientation is basically you've got standing lines and then one of them is bent. So it's a good pre-attentive attribute. Then you've got the line length. This is basically the basis for all of our bar graphs. Then you've got something called a line width. The reason why we're talking about this is when you are visualizing, it is a good idea to remember these building blocks. And depending on the kind of data that you want to show, you can actually understand which works better. So we've got orientation, we've got line length, then we've got something called line width, the smaller, how fat the line becomes. Then you've got something called size, which is another thing that we normally use. The bigger the size, it stands out. Then you've got something with shapes. This is something that we use in icons, in maps. So basically icons are the sum total of shapes. So this square over here stands out with bars. You've got something with curvature. This is something that can also be used. Curvature is something that we also use in pi in a different way. So curvature gives you an idea of exaggeration in a way. Then you've got added marks. So this is another way of doing that. You've got enclosures over here. So these are basically different kinds of form. So basically you're making one stand out of from the lot. The second is play with colors. This intensity is something that we already saw on the previous slide. You have all black and then all of a sudden you have something in gray, it stands out. The other is you can go with different hue or different colors altogether. Red stands out from a group of black. And the third is something called a spatial position. This is something that we use in our, if you've seen family trees anywhere, you're basically making a hierarchy. So if you want to show a process infograph of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So this is basically what we're using over there. So in a 2D position, you can actually change the position of this, and this gives you a sense of hierarchy. That the one that in most likely circumstance, we'll assume that the 3 dots on top have more weightage than the one at bottom. So these are the basic building blocks on the basis of which all our graphs, charts, pies are built. So I'll just move ahead and I'll show you the different pre-attentive attributes work for different kinds of situations. So I'll just quickly tell you what this table talks about. On the left-hand side, you've got the pre-attentive attributes. Then in this column, you've got the table, the name of these individual pre-attentive attributes. And the third is talking about which of these pre-attentive attributes can be used for showing hierarchy in your data set. So placement and position works well with if you want to show a hierarchy in your data set. It works. So if you're trying to make an organizational hierarchy, who's the boss, the person who's junior. So this is a wonderful way of going about. The good thing about this is that it works with an infinitely big class size. It does not get complicated, as opposed to, let's say, a pie. If you have too many pie slices, it becomes very complicated. So hierarchy is a wonderful thing if you have a data set which has a lot of data points in it, and it can be shown in hierarchy. So it can accommodate infinitely long data size. It is good with quantities, categories, and relations. I'll move on to the next one as well. Text label is another way. This is something that we intuitively use in our everyday life when we are trying to look at bullet points. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you want to go further, 1A, 1B, 1C. So you're basically making a hierarchy again over there. Again, it works for infinitely big classes. It is also good for quantities, for showing different kinds of quantities, for establishing different categories in terms of hierarchy and relations within them. So then we've got size and area, the big and the small bubble. It can be any shape for that matter. It can be, so you must have seen, these are pretty common stereotypes that we have. If you're talking about forest fire, then you can have a fire icon. If you're talking about houses that have been damaged because of an extreme weather event, you might actually use small chunks of houses as an icon. So even this works with hierarchy. It works in infinitely many class size. And it is very good with quantities, but it is very bad with categories, because with size or with the size, you can't show which one is more, what is the category or which level at which they exist. So if you're trying to establish a category, it would not work fine over here. Then the other is the angle of your visualization or the visual pre-attentive attribute. It works fine with hierarchy. It works fine with quantity. I'll just jump down a little further and let's look at the shape sizes or the icons. This works with, so over here, we are just talking about the individual pre-attentive attribute. So if you're using different kinds of shape, it does not give you an idea of which is bigger or smaller. Because of that, the quantities column, it is blank over here. But it is very good to establish different categories. So you can have the circle over here might signify the number of people in that place. The square over there might signify something else, a number of families with cars over there. And the triangle can basically signify a third attribute over there. So shapes and icons is something that we commonly use when we are dealing with maps and we are trying to create the legends over there. So we use different shapes over there. They are wonderful for making different categories, earmarking different categories. but they are not very effective when you're trying to look at quantities. There are some other examples as well. We've got pattern and texture. We've got an enclosed enclosure. This is basically good for creating connections between different things and relations between different things. We use it extensively at our workplace to make infographics where we're trying to establish a process. So we basically club different chunks together. So if I were to say, how do we manufacture plastic in a country or globally for that matter, if I want to explain that. So I will basically bring it down to 3 steps. One is called the pre-consumer level, then the consumer level, and then maybe what happens to the life cycle of a plastic if we are talking about. So we have got the pre-consumer level. So pre-consumer level would be enclosed in one of these rectangle box, within which there'll be 2-3 steps. First is the extraction of petrochemicals. Second is processing of the petrochemicals to make plastic. Third is sending it to a factory to make plastic products. Then the other chunk would be something, let's say the consumer and how they're using it. And the third chunk might be the post-consumer level, where basically we talk about the waste and how it is handled. So if I were to explain that process, which is basically there is no hierarchy over here. All of these are basically different steps. So if you put it in a hierarchy, it looks like one is more important than the other. But if I want to show them at the same level, then enclosures and connections come very handy. Line pattern is another thing that we often use when we're trying to talk about how, let's say, trade happens between different countries across the world. So if one of the example, if we take this plastic example forward, if I were to show on the map of the globe, countries which are importing plastics and countries that are manufacturing plastics. And I also want to show what happens after that. So I know for a fact that one of the biggest manufacturers of petrochemical industries is Reliance, which is in India, and there's another one in China. So they are the originator. So from there, it goes to a lot of countries. So let's say it goes to Bangladesh, it goes to Pakistan, it goes to some other places. So we use one kind of line pattern over there. And then I know in Bangladesh, it is converted into a PET bottle. And then after it is converted into, it is given an end shape. It then is sold at a market in, let's say, the US or in Europe. So basically, you've got different kinds of information that is happening and you're using lines to show that. So line pattern comes very handy over there. So different kinds of lines are used to show the way the entire economy flows over there. Then we can again show from there, the fourth attribute can be what happens after a consumer throws it out. So I know for a fact that in Europe, what they do is bulk of their waste, plastic waste and otherwise, they are exported to Africa. And in Africa, they're either recycled or they're burnt over there. So another line which shows that from Europe and from the US, the waste is being flown back to Africa. So that is how line patterns to work. Then you've got line endings, which is basically a deviation or a variation of line patterns. I personally prefer line patterns because I think it is easier to understand as opposed to line endings, because these visuals. So I've seen in my personal experience, end users or readers try to understand why is there an arrow and why is there this. But this also works fine if you want to show the start and the end points as well. And then you've got line weight. Line weight is another thing that is always used. I will have some examples of that as well. So there's something called a Sankey diagrams. Sankey diagrams are basically, if I were to show you let's imagine there are like 10 countries which export plastic and 10 countries that import plastic. Now, let's say one of the 10 countries that is exporting plastic is India. Now, India sends, let's say out of 100 units of plastic, it sends 60 units to, let's say, Bangladesh, 20 units to US, and 40 units to 60, 20, and another 20 units to Europe. So the line weight will help me understand that more is going to the Bangladesh. So 60 would be a fatter line. The other two would be slightly slimmer in dimension. Similarly, for all the others, you can do that as well. So line weight becomes handy over there to create establishing different categories and how information flows. This is a list. This is basically built on top of the pre-attentive attributes. We did talk about some of it in our previous live session, or the previous session that we had before this one. I'll just quickly pause over here and I'll jump onto a PDF so that we can actually visually see what this is. This is a very powerful visualization. This was done by Financial Times. And it basically is building on top of what we already learned in the previous session. It says that if there are different kinds of messages that you want to give out, so if you want to show a deviation in your data set, then these are the different kinds of visualizations that come very handy. So you've got a diverging bar, which is basically a deviation of the bar, the stacked bar or the normal bar simple bar that we talked about. Then you've got another. So if you look at it closely, we are using the position and we are using different colors over here to show diverging stacked bar. So these are the two pre-attentive attributes that have been used over here. Similarly, spine chart is another alternative, and they've got surplus and deficit filled line. So what they have done is they're saying that there are different kinds of relationships that you would want to show in your data sets. One is a deviation. The other is correlations, that one is leading to the other. So there's a relationship between two. So for correlation, it says that scatter plots and line and plus column is a nice way of showing that this is going up and so is the other thing. So basically, stubble burning is going up in Haryana and Punjab. So is the air pollution level in Delhi. So if there are two attributes that you're talking about, stubble burning and you're talking about air pollution levels, then you use line and column together. So it basically shows that it's going up together. Correlation is another one. Then if you want to talk about rankings, which state or which country or the example that we were talking about even in the previous session, which is the safest city to stay in India, which is the least safe city to stay in India. So bars come really handy over there. That's basically the different orientation of the same thing, ordered bar. Ordered proportional symbol is another thing that works very nicely. Dot strip plots also are very interesting. So basically what is happening over here is, if I were to show you, let's say the same example, which is the safest or which is the safest city to stay in India. So for each of the cities, I have got information, let's say month-wise, January. So let's in Delhi, in January, there were 10 events that happened. In Feb, there were 20 events that happened. So you can basically, or if I have day-wise, so you can have all the days over here. So it's a lot of information, which you can't do in a bar or a graph or a chart. So you basically, each of these individual dots signify the day when there has been an event. So you've got Delhi. Delhi has events in the first few months, then there is some break in between. That means those months were relatively leaner, and then there is again another. Then they've got another, let's say you've got West Bengal. West Bengal has had crime on every day in each of the months. So this is much worse. So if you have a lot of data set and you want to really plot it, so dot strip plot is a very effective way of showing. So all of these individual lines signify different states and whatever is the attribute that we're talking about. Slope is another way, which is basically a line graph in a way, which is also used. Lollipop chart, I don't personally use it because I think it is too confusing at times. But lollipop chart is another way through which you can establish different ranks between different units that you'll be working with. The other attribute that they talk about is distribution, which is a very commonly used WO. So distribution is basically how a data set is spread across area. So if it is skewed or not. So if you're talking about, let's say, how much crime has happened in Delhi over the past 15 or 20 or 30 years. So if we want to show that, histograms are the best way of going about. Histograms basically give you a trend in terms of what is happening. One of the commonly used histogram right now that we use in our organization is for showing how climate change and how temperature rise is happening in India. So if you look at over there, the histogram is basically, it's lean, and then it goes up. So that is what we show in histograms over here. Then we've got something called a box plot. This is slightly complicated, but this is if you have ever invested in stock market, you will be able to understand what this is. This is slightly complicated, but this packs in a lot of information the same way dot strip plot was able to pack in a lot of information. So what these suggest is, so what happens in the stock market, I'll use that example to help you understand how these actually operate. So all of these individual units are for individual days. So let's say this is for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we're tracking the performance of the stock market over 3 days, over 3 days of this week. So this point, this point is basically the highest point in that entire day in Monday. So let's say the stock market reached 100 points. So the highest point is shown over here. The lowest point is shown over here. So it also, because it fluctuates constantly. So the lowest plot is, let's say it also dropped till about 40. And this basically over here shows basically where it actually ended. So it stopped, let's say around 60 is where it was at the end of the day. So a box plot basically shows you a lot of information. And usually this gray area that you're talking about, it also shows you how much movement had happened. So this actually works very well when we're dealing with, so it basically shows you that in that day, for most of the time,
there is a question in the
yeah, I'm trying to understand. Can
like they ask that the visible on screen, that is a table, type of table.
Actually, is it a type of table? So these are basically the building blocks. So this is basically the type of table. So you can actually make a bar graph using this as well. So if in stock markets, we normally use this very frequently. We also use it when you're dealing with any scientific paper. So these are basically the individual bars that you see. So these are the individual bars.
Priyanka, you can ask directly.
Yeah. Actually, what I'm asking is the current slide that you're showing, is it showing the list of types of tables, or is it something else? Because I can't see it.
These are the kinds of tables that you can use for different kinds of information. So the assumption is that you have seen your data set. So let's say I am sitting with the data set. Let's say the one of the examples or the questions that was asked in the last session was the gender divide. So if I want to show the gender divide of different states in India, now which is the visual that I pick up? So if I had a number in terms of ranking, let's say I had like Haryana is the worst and let's say Delhi is the best. So I've got a ranking kind of a thing. So then you would choose one of these ranking. You can either go for an ordered bar. So these are different variations that you can choose to show that data set. Or you can go for ordered column, or you can show the proportional symbol. So basically the small bubble would be for Haryana and the biggest bubble would be for Delhi. Or you can show it for dot strip. Does it make sense? Priyanka, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yes, thumbs up.
So basically, these are the different things these are the different kinds of graphs that you can pick up. And this is beyond the normal graph that we look at. So this is basically an exhaustive list of different kinds of graphs. So yesterday you were going through Flourish. You had a session on Flourish. On Flourish, you would find a lot of these graphs. So you would find graphs like these, the pyramid population pyramids. You would find visualizations of these. So these are beyond what we normally see. You would also find visualizations like these, dot plots. Dot plots is something that we use very frequently. So this is basically a bar graph. It's basically a line graph kind of a visual, X and Y axis. But the individual information that you're plotting over here. So if I ask you to show me the maximum and minimum temperature of different cities in India. So the first one might be Delhi, and you have got different temperatures over here, 20 degree, 21 degree, 22 degree, and so forth and so on. So in Delhi, the minimum temperature on a certain year or on a certain day was 10 degrees, and the maximum was, let's say, 20 degree. Similarly, for another place, this is, for another city, this is. So basically, these are the different visuals that you can use for plotting your infographics. So the different kinds of things that you can possibly do with it is distribution is something that you can look at. You can also show change over time, basically what used to happen earlier and what happens now. So over here you have different variations to look for. In my personal experience, what happens, so this is a very commonly used area chart, is something that we normally use. And this is basically, if you attended my yesterday's session, I talked about how the debate around climate change right now, basically who would pay. So the developed world say that today China, India, and all the Asian countries are generating a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So they should pay for cleaning up. So they should for shifting to renewables. The developing countries and the poor countries, they are saying that what we are facing in terms of air pollution and in terms of climate change impacts is because of things that have happened in the past. So they say that the historical ill doings or misdoings of the developed world is basically what happened, is the reason why we are where we are. So historical polluter pays. So to show that, this is the area chart is something that you can show. So area chart from here can start from 1900s. Basically, we have data from 1900s and it goes up. So what you'll see is that over here, bulk of these would be the developed countries. None of the developing countries would come over here. But towards the end, you will see a lot of developing countries coming up as well. So area chart is one way of showing that historically it was basically these were the major polluters, and now very recently the developing countries are becoming polluters. So that is another kind of information that you can plot through visualization. Then you can also show part to whole. Part to whole is basically you show a single entity which basically is broken out from the entire. So pie chart is one of the most commonly used way. Stacked columns is another very commonly used way of going about. Proportional stacked column is another way we use. Proportional stacked column, unlike stacked column, is used when you are using when your data set is in percentages. So all of the information is basically 100%. So how you're breaking it down within that 100%. So if I were to tell you an average farm household in India gets let's say this is the amount of so let's say out of the 100 rupees that a household gets, 60 comes from farming, 20 comes from wages, 10 comes from livestock, and another 10 comes from, let's say, manual labor. So if you want to break that up for an average farmer, so proportional stacked bar comes very, very, very handy over there. And you can basically compare, when you have multiple stacked bars, you can compare different states over here. So maybe the first line is for Delhi, the second line is for Punjab. So you see a Punjab farmer gets more from wages, from cultivation, the first one, vis-a-vis the other states. So proportional stacked bar works very fine. Pies, donuts. So we basically talked about all of these things. Tree map is a very popularly used interactive way of showing how the hierarchies between them and the chunks that exist. Voronoi, I have never used it personally, but I understand what it is also doing. It is basically breaking up the entire into small chunks, the way you do in pie. So you've got the entire 100% as in a square, and you're breaking up different chunks within it. So you can show that if of all the air pollution that was emitted in 2022, India was this much, China was this much, this was this much. So all of those things can be done over here. Sunburst is another thing, which is basically a deviation of pi. You are showing different levels of information over here. I'll not get into that, but it is there in Flourish, and it's one of the more commonly used visualizations in Flourish. Sunburst is a very, very powerful tool if you have multiple kinds of information that you want to show. Then you have got ARC. This is basically the visualization that is used when we are looking at Indian Parliament and elections. So which party is doing how much, which is basically a deviation from your pi. Your pi is 360 degrees. This is 180 degree. So these are basically different kinds of visualizations that you can use. However, what is important amongst all of this is you have to know what you want to show with your data sets. So you can either show deviation, depending on what kind of data set you're dealing with. If you want to show correlation, that one is leading to the other. So if I'm doing a story on, let's say, air pollution in Delhi during the winter season, I would say that it is happening because of stubble burning. So there are two different variables that I want to show. So all of the graphs that are given in this column can be used. Ranking is another kind of information that you want to show, which is the best, the worst, the least, the happiest city on earth, all of those stories that we normally come across. That is basically ranking. So for ranking kind of a data set, these are the visuals that you can use. For distribution, these are the visualizations you can use. Distribution is basically how things have changed over time. In India, in 1960s, we were not food secure. But in 1990, after Green Revolution, India became food secure. So you can show that in a distribution chart over a period of time. Change over time is another thing that you can so these are similar that way. So you can also use, so if you look at the visuals that I also use, they're basically very similar from one another. And part to whole is something to make stand out. So over there, your pie comes very, very nice. If you want to highlight a portion, stacked column also works over there. The other is magnitude. So magnitude shows the size comparisons. And the last one is spatial. The second last is spatial information. If you want to show something on map. So we basically, in the last session, we talked about how basic chloroplast maps can be used. Then there's another variation of that where you're basically using bubbles. We have seen this on Google Maps as well. Different bubbles to show which place is doing better and which place is doing worse. Then you've got the flow map that we were talking about, how trade flows from one place to the other. So these are flow maps, and contour maps are another. This is basically a variation of heat maps. So your contour maps are showing. So if you want to show how an earthquake happened in an area, so it is showing different levels. So the black spot over here is basically the epicenter of the earthquake. The gray part is the worst affected maybe, and the grayish, as it goes out, you are showing it is becoming less gray. So the impact is fading away. So contour maps are again used. I know it looks like a lot of information over here. My personal experience is, depending on the kind of work that you are doing or the kind of data sets that you would be handling at your workplace, there are a few graphs that you would be using every day. And there are some of the graphs that you would be very rarely using. So basically, this is a cheat sheet. So whenever you have a data set, I normally use this. This is developed by Financial Times to identify what are the different graphs that I can possibly use in my infograph. So, okay, so I have got ranking kind of a data set. These are the things that I can use. Then what I do is, out of that, depending on what I am going to do with the end product. So if it is going to be published in a magazine, which has an A4 size, then I know if I have half a page to fill up a visualization, then I might not go for a pie, but I might go for a bar graph. Or if I want to put it out on social media, I know bar graphs might not be very good with my readers, so I might go for a pie. So basically, depending on my end product, I basically alter it accordingly. So if I want to do it for my mobile phone, I know a vertical orientation works better. So the same data set, I would put in a vertical orientation. So I would prefer using an ordered bar, because it will work fine on a mobile phone screen as opposed to a column bar. So basically, those are the thought processes that go behind when we are identifying what kind of visualization we want to use. For a TV or for a laptop, this is a better way of showing the same data set. For a mobile phone, this is a better way of showing the data set. So it's a portrait and the horizontal version of it, the landscape version of it. So when we're identifying, the idea is that when we are identifying which graph pie chart to use, we have to understand, first of all, what our data set is talking, or what is it that we want to, what is the message that we want to give out from data. And then we also have to take into consideration where it is going to be eventually published. If it is for an interactive dashboard that I'm creating, maybe I will use something as complex as sunburst. So sunburst in a magazine or in a newspaper, you would seldom find a sunburst kind of a visualization, because there is too much happening over here. But if you are using it for a on website for an interactive thing, so you hover the mouse and each of these individual chunks, whatever the mean, they would come out. So sunburst visualization is popularly used by different websites that look at the box office performances of different movies. So basically, the bigger chunks are different movies. So let's say the most popular box office hit this year would be the longest one, then the next one. And all of these individual lines are usually different years over there. So this would be 2021, 2022, 2023, and so on and so forth. But if I want to print it in a newspaper or in a magazine, I would never use this. I would basically use something else. But if it is on a website, it looks very pretty to look at. So if you add different colors to it, it looks very, very live and pretty. So it is a nice way of catering to the iconic to attract the attention of your reader. So if you have something interesting that stands out on a website, there is a higher tendency that you would spend some time exploring it, as opposed to a normal bar chart graph, which is something that our brain is very accustomed with. So I'll move on with this. I will be sharing this PDF as well. So whenever you are starting off, at least in the beginning, it's a good idea to go through all of these individually and see what works best for you. You can even try using this cheat sheet when you're doing your project work. So over here, I'll just talk about quickly a study was conducted by MIT in 2013, where they basically went about asking people what makes a visualization memorable. So what they did was they were asking individuals what kind of visualizations you remember the most. So basically they had a stack card with 10 different kinds of visualizations, let's say a bar graph, a chart, a pie, and then they asked them which one do you remember the most. So what they found out over there was that a grid matrix kind of a visualization, which is basically a classic example of how our railways timetables work, if you look at it. So you've got two different axes over here. So from here to there. So they said that grid matrix works best. So if your raw data can be visualized in a grid matrix format, then there is a very high chance that your reader would remember what they've seen. Then they said the second most memorable or recallable type of visualization was tree network or hierarchies. So basically, if your data set can be visualized in this format, then it is better. Otherwise, you can look at others as well. And the third they said was this diagram and illustrations kind of a visualization. This is something that we did at Down to Earth a while back during the Volkswagen debacle, where it was found out that they were using a chip to downplay how much emissions were coming out of their cars to get clearances from different pollution control boards. So what we did was we explained the process over here, what was happening and what wrong they were doing. It's a process or a diagram infograph. And over here, we could have used anything else, but we decided we'll use the same thing and show it. So this was a print infograph that we had in the magazine. These were the commonly used cars where they did something wrong. So if I were to own any of these cars, I would immediately be able to relate to it. So this is basically another example of that. So this is an exhaustive list of what that study paper found. It said that with pictures or junk art, if you have an image in your visualization, grid matrix is the most recallable, tree network is the second most recallable, diagram is what we just looked at. Area maps are very nice, maps itself is very nice. So this is the hierarchy that they looked at. So if you can, with your data set, make any of the ones that are above, then there is a higher chance that people will remember what they've seen, as opposed to the bar and line graphs, because we are very used to it now. So the pre-attentive quotient of that has gone down. We are so used to looking at bar, graph, and charts and pies and tables for that matter, even that when we now see any new information in that, we don't remember that very often, or we don't we have a lesser recall value. So this is basically what it talked about. I'll just quickly skim through this because bulk of this has been already talked about in the previous session. So what I have tried to do is I'm over here talking about the different kinds of infographics that you can make, or different kinds of visualizations that you can make. So think of it in terms of an infograph or a data set or a dashboard, which was basically talked about in the previous session as well, is basically a sum total of different individual infographics. So you've got a pie and a chart and a bar. So one of the ways of going about it is a statistical infograph. These are examples that we've used in our organization. So if you look at over here, this was printed on one page. So you've got a table, you've got a pie, and then further a breakup of that pie into individual graphs, bar graphs. So this is one way of going about. So this is statistical infographics. Then this is called an information infograph. If you look at it, what we have done over here is we've looked at the native problems. So different indigenous communities and what kind of problems they have. So this has got a lot of information and very little data, if you look at it. So if you have information, which is basically a qualitative kind of an thing, why something is happening. So this is a nice way of going about. This is an informational infographic. Then you've got something called a timeline kind of an infograph. This is one example of that. What happened, how one thing led to the other, the evolution of it all. So this is the top portion is basically a timeline infographic. This is a process infographic on how to make infographics. So if you look at it, the hierarchy thing comes up over here. One is leading to the other. This is a geographic infographic that exists. So this is a map infographic that can be done. This is a comparative infograph that we normally do. So this was something that we did. We had done a story on, there was a debate on reservations. So we talked about the story that we had carried down to earth was on how most of the communities that are being given reservations right now, they did not traditionally want reservations because they were they were people with a lot of land. The ones that have been talked about right now, Jats and Marathas and Patels, you don't really associate them with reservations. So on each of the page of that cover story, we had this information. The map talks about which part of India they belong to, and basically it's some other information. So this is basically a table presented in a different way with icons and everything else. So we realized that this was a very good way for the reader to compare different information on different pages. So this is a comparative infographic example. Then you've got interactive infographics as well. With this information, I'll just end with this one idea that I normally use at my workplace personally. And in fact, the team of visual graphics editors that we have at Down to Earth, we have started using it and it actually has helped us in a long way. So what we normally do is something called sketching. So when you have all the data points that you are working with, so let's say if I'm doing a story on climate change, or let's say we're doing a story on air pollution in Delhi during winters. So one of the most important data set is what is the air pollution levels in Delhi. So that is one data set that goes into the story. Then the secondary piece of information would be, let's say, how much crop burning is happening in the neighboring agricultural areas. And the third data set might be for the story is what is the share of vehicular pollution that is happening in Delhi. The fourth data point can be, let's say, how much are industries generating now that the air pollution levels are high. The fifth can be whether the air pollution levels during Diwali, so how much crackers were being burned. So all of these data sets will come into my story. So they are basically individual paragraphs in my story. So my first paragraph would be air pollution in Delhi is really high. So that basically shows what kind of air pollution levels exist over there. Then the other pieces of information will also come in subsequent in terms of a hierarchy of importance. So when you have all of that data sets with you and you basically analyze that, what I normally do, and this is something that we normally do, is we take a paper and pen. I at times also use sketch pens, and I basically sketch out. So this is a magazine infograph that we wanted to come up with. So a lot of X's over here. This is basically the headline. Then I've got a deepish intro. So this is the paper that I give to my visualizer or the graphic designer. Then I have a table over here with travel preferences. Then I've got two big numbers over here that I'm highlighting. This is basically my way of telling him that I want an image over here. And then there is another small headline and intro. And then individual states information along with bar graphs is what I want. So I give it to him. And basically what he does is, this is what we created and published eventually. So the reason why I do it is over here, I can make a lot of different iterations. So I tried bar graphs, I tried pies without the actual data. So it saves a lot of time. And I'm basically only thinking about the visual element at the point in time. So all of these things so usually for an important infograph that I'm working on, I normally have 10 to 12 different iterations in terms of how I can basically put all of these individual blocks over here. So this is a classic example of sketching. I would request, if you are dealing with a lot of data, you can try using them, this process. It is also very enjoyable. You can go into the park. I normally go and sit in the park when I'm doing this, or I'm doing something more interesting, or I'm listening to music when I'm doing this. So sketching is something that you can also look at. I'll just stop over here, and there are 4 minutes left. I know I've given a lot of information over here. If there are any questions, queries that you want to ask, any clarifications that you want over here. I'll just then wind up and I'll just tell you what are the 3 things that I talked about. So we basically looked at pre-attentive attributes right at the beginning, which is basically the small little things that make your visualization stand out. So that is something that you should always have in your visualization when you're looking at it. One of the very commonly used pre-attentive attribute that I've not talked about over here, but magazines and newspapers and web stories do, is a very good headline. 9 out of 10 Indians do this, or 6 ways you can do this. So that is also a very interesting pre-attentive attribute. So if you have that, then you have to go to the next building block, which is basically looking at different kinds of visualization that you can use to communicate your message. So we looked at what is the message that you want to give out. If you want to establish hierarchies, if you want to establish rankings, if you want to establish a change over time. So which kind of visualization works best in that situation? Depending on the raw data, you can actually pick up the ones that you're looking at. And lastly, whenever you're doing any story, you would have multiple data points. One is obviously the example that we took of air pollution. One is obviously how bad is the air pollution level in Delhi, but there would be sub information as well, why it is happening. So crop burning is another, then there is another, then there is another. So there is a hierarchy of information for that story. So all of those information would basically be small parts. So when you're making an infographic, think about how much space each one of them would take in the final output that you're looking at. If it is a magazine place that you're working on, if it is a website screen, if it is a mobile screen, if it is a social media post, you're basically breaking all of those things down accordingly. And I would like to thank all of you for joining in, and thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ranjit. It seems you have so much to tell and time is so less. And thanks for this extensive presentation. Of course, consuming this much information and then interpretation, it will take time, specifically for the participants. But still, I ask all the participants, if you have any question, any queries, or you want to add on, please come out with your questions. Let us see if in the session they all are giving you thanks. Any participant, if you are having any question.
No questions, Pragya, I think we can conclude.
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot, Rajit. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you. Thank
Good.
you for the session, and thanks to all the participants who took part today, and thank you all the team of Newswriters In, and to the resource person. Thanks a lot. We'll meet tomorrow.
Well, participants, there is a slight change in tomorrow's schedule.
Okay, sir.
Please stay back for some time.
Great, sir.
Tomorrow, Bakul is not available.
Okay.
So 6:30 session will be taken by Anjan Chakravarti.
Okay.
And Shweta will take 7:30 session.
Okay, sir.
So that way, Anjan will replace Bakul, but timings are changed because 6:30 will be Anjan and 7:30 will be Shweta Kothari.
Okay. Timings are the same, but the resource person's time has been changed. Otherwise, 6:30 to 8:30 and 6:30 to
Large
7.
number of participants have already left, but I would like to know that why you don't have too many questions.
So today's session was very I too feel that it will take time to consume every information and then internalization.
I have no intention to acquire expertise in data visualization at this stage of my career.
Yeah, but
the past intention as author Navneet, so I would have asked a lot of questions.
So actually, the thing is, I think there was too much information.
Yeah.
Once I think students start practicing, they'll get to know where they get stuck, and probably they'll have more questions when they start practicing these graphs, types of graphs and visualizations.
Well, but I think you entrap the resource person in between. Somewhere some elaborations are required. That's my common sense.
I think
Trying
for
away,
1 hour, too much information was there for specifically for the 1 hour, and getting all information in 1 hour was. I too kept on reading, understanding, but it takes time, sir, specifically for us who are not from this particular
the
background.
resource person to move slow.
No, not slow, but content is more for the 1 hour. For this is my observation. I don't know about other participants.
I think once we start practicing, we will know where we are
Yeah,
getting stuck or where our doubts
yeah,
really are.
you are right.
Anyway, so we'll conclude now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone. Thank you,
Good night.
sir.
Thank you.